Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. We are on session 6 of keeping your faith while in the fire. The year was 539 BC. Nearly 70 years had passed since Daniel and his friends were brought in chains to Babylon. Daniel was an old man, well over 80. Nebuchadnezzar was dead. He had been for about 73 years, and Belshazzar, his spoiled grandson, was on the throne. Belshazzar was hosting a party, an all-out rager in our terms. Suddenly a floating hand appeared and etched 3 mysterious words into the plaster, then disappeared. As Daniel was brought in to interpret the words, we learned that the message God supernaturally delivered to a wicked king is actually a message from God to people in all times and places. The key idea here in this session, God has given us a word from above that gives right perspective on the present and the future. Session 6, Part 1, Partying in the Face of Death. Daniel 5, 1 through 7. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king of his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing and shew me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler of the kingdom. And if you know the book of Daniel pretty well, you know what that writing was about and that Daniel interpreted it. It was pretty much telling the king that he would fall, that night he would be dead. And we already know that so many were brought back into captivity due to his following of false gods and insulting God by using the best cups and candlesticks that they had that were supposed to be for specific purposes. The events of these verses are pretty straightforward. If a little weird, King Belshazzar was having a lavish party using the vessels from the temple in Jerusalem as serving ware when a disembodied hand appeared and wrote a cryptic message on the wall. What was happening in the background is less obvious. Belshazzar knew the combined armies of the Medes and the Persians were less than 50 miles away. Everybody in Babylon knew that, and everybody was on edge. This was a humongous and well-organized army, so why, in the face of this danger, was Belshazzar throwing a party? We don't know. Maybe he was trying to put on a brave face to inspire everyone by his courage. Maybe he was trying to drown his own fears in amusement and alcohol. Maybe he was so arrogant that he thought Babylon could never fall. Why was it so offensive for Belshazzar to use the vessels from Israel's temple? How does pride play into the self-deception we see from Belshazzar in this passage? Maybe you remember all the wacky ways people responding to the turning of the millennium at the end of 1999. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing or seeing something about the end of the world. It's 2000. I remember all that. There was a genuine fear that a Y2K computer bug would cause a global computer crash that would bring civilization to a screeching halt. Some people responded by stockpiling, while others responded by partying. And some of us just ignored it and went on about our business. Well, Belshazzar chose the latter and partied like it was 539 BC because it's easier to distract ourselves with amusement than face what's going on around us. The issue is that our problems don't go away simply because we aren't thinking about them. The face of death lingers after the party is over. List some amusements you use to distract yourself from unpleasant thoughts. I know music's a big one, and I know there's specific movies or shows that help me, and there's also the Word of God, prayer, and sometimes just going for a walk. Why is it difficult for many men to deal with unpleasant thoughts head on? In his book, The Denial of Death, the Jewish atheist philosopher Ernest Becker says that in the face of our own mortality, we usually turn to one of three things to console ourselves. We see all three here with Belshazzar. First, he said we boast about our accomplishments as if those accomplishments give us some kind of immortality. We try to tell ourselves that we've done something that has added meaning to human history and therefore will last forever. Belshazzar brought out all the gold and silver they'd acquired from other kingdoms to show that Babylon was special. Second, Becker said we turn to romance. We find meaning in the thrills of sex or the feeling of being treasured by someone. That person's love justifies us, gives us a reason to live. Belshazzar's party was filled with wives and concubines and sex. Finally, he said we turn to religion to show that we're worthy of whatever we will face, or admit that we're not worthy and that it's all grace. We use religion to console ourselves that we're the best of all people, and that for whatever comes next we'll be counted worthy. You can see that in Belshazzar's extravagant toasting of their gods. Where do you see these distractions in our modern day Babylon? The biggest one right now, and it's getting kind of dangerous and annoying, but cell phones. People can't seem to walk anywhere or drive without one being in their hand. Why should Christians handle unpleasant thoughts differently than Babylon? I know it's better to give it to God and go on about what we can take care of and give the rest to God, because sometimes we don't have it in us to take care of what we're facing completely without God's help. The only difference between Belshazzar and us is that he was told the day he would die. We may not know the exact day that he did, but we are just certain of the day's inevitability. We have one life to live, and how we live matters. Those who know Jesus can live undistracted lives because the end has been written for us. And the end here is only a new beginning. Because when we leave this temporary campground, get called home, it's going to be much better. Jesus, help me live with the end in mind and embrace difficulty with a clear mind and an undistracted heart. We all face trials, and some do like to go hit the bars, get drunk, sleep around like Belshazzar did to get their minds off of their problems. There are some that face it head on, some that find small comforts, and then there are those who just give it to God, try not to think about it, just try to think of His glory, and just ask that His will be done. So whatever you guys are going through, my best advice would be give it to God. Do what you can, but give it to God. He will lead you through. May y'all have a wonderful day. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. Much love.